So a while back, I made a TikTok about Vaush and the DPRK or North Korea, and he actually watched it and responded to it on his stream. So I guess I made it in the world of internet politics. He mostly calls me a tankie, but I'm gonna respond to his criticisms of my TikToks. Let's do it.
You've seen this weak takedown to your April Fool's joke? Wait, did somebody try to take down the April Fool's joke?
Socialism is about red flags
This has 8,000 likes.
Thank you, Vaush.
and putting words like peoples.
Yeah, Vaush, people are only mad at you because Korea's flag is red and they have peoples in their name. We just worship these authoritarian governments, you know?
True.
Actually, that's not true. What I'm putting on screen right now is a visual explainer used by Marxist intellectual Domenico Losurdo to explain Marxist thought and Marxist political theory at its very base. So you'll see there the roots of the tree are sovereignty or anti-colonial sovereignty. So every country has the right to govern themselves. The people of that country have a right to decide what kind of government they want. The DPRK underwent years of brutal colonization under the Japanese and fought for their freedom. And as soon as they gained independence, the United States intervened, killing 15 to 20% of their people. So as a Marxist, I do not support that. I support the sovereignty of the DPRK. And me, as someone living in the United States, I'm going to actively speak out against the destabilization efforts against the DPRK. Next one is right to economic well-being. Not only do dropping bombs and killing people hurt a country's economic well-being, but ever since the U.S. lost the war, they've done everything they can to keep the DPRK in poverty, mostly using an embargo. And then at the top of the tree, you see civil, political, cultural, and environmental rights. And this is where you can critique North Korea, right? Or the DPRK. You can say they have human rights abuses. Their people don't have the civil rights or the political rights that I wish they had. However, that does not mean I think the United States should intervene in Korea and overthrow their government because they don't have the same political, civil, and cultural rights as us, right? Because before those civil, political, and cultural rights, I support their sovereignty and I support their right to economic well-being. And I know that the U.S. State Department wants only to disrupt those things, to overthrow their sovereignty and extract resources from North Korea, as we do around the rest of the world. Next, I'll show the liberal tradition, which has its roots in private property rights, the trunk is civil and political rights, and then the top is identity politics. And this is why people will sometimes call you a liberal, Vaush, because oftentimes it seems like you're more focused on identity politics than you are about national sovereignty and economic well-being.
Some people might say, hey, the U.S. killed 20% of Korea's population and didn't leave a single building over 2 stories tall left standing.
What the f does that have to do with being a tankie or not?
Vaush, I'm not arguing here that everybody needs to be a tankie, your weird internet label that you give to anybody who disagrees with you about foreign policy. My critique is that you are promoting, using your giant platform, chauvinistic and imperialistic attitudes that the State Department has tried for years to perpetrate towards the DPRK in North Korea. And as a leftist or socialist living within the United States, the heart of the empire, that's something that you shouldn't do.
And ever since we've crushed them under embargo and left troops at their border, keeping them in a state of constant warfare. People who say that are just tankies.
Wait, hold on. North Korea is also responsible for that state of constant warfare. North Korea does illegal nuclear weapons tests and threatens their neighbors constantly.
So your actual beef is that they threaten South Korea. South Korea, the country with millions of dollars in funding from the U.S., who constantly keep a supply of troops at the 38th parallel, including U.S. soldiers who are stationed in Korea. So the U.S. has their troops over there, and the DPRK doesn't have their troops over here, but they're the aggressors? Okay, Vaush. I'm not sure how you can call North Korea the aggressors in this situation because they've made threats when the U.S. backed the far-right Singham Rhee dictatorship who murdered millions during the Korean War, including filling the city of Pyonyang with bodies as the U.S. bombed every single building over 2 stories tall. And after failing to get the DPRK to bend to their will, the U.S. went to the UN and manufactured a voting plan to divide the country in half. And on that divide, the U.S. and their far-right allies in South Korea have kept troops ever since, while also keeping the DPRK under an embargo so they can't trade, holding their country in poverty. Are the DPRK really threatening their neighbors here? Or are they saying, please leave us alone and give us national sovereignty?
Wait, hold on. Wait, are you suggesting America is responsible currently, like exclusively responsible for North Korea's political isolation? They maintain it deliberately because they know that their state can't exist unless they're engaging in the preconditions that would allow it to be propped up by China.
Well, don't just take my word for it, Vaush. Listen to former President Jimmy Carter, who in 1994 became the first acting or former president to visit the DPRK. And he came back with many conclusions that got him in trouble with the US media, saying that the DPRK actually wants peace, and the US is doing everything they can to hold the DPRK in poverty, while also doing everything they can to boost South Korea.
They maintain it deliberately.
DPRK is purposefully holding themselves under embargo so that they can trade with China is insanity. The only reason they trade with China is because that is one of their only options, as is the case with Iran, Venezuela, and many other countries who the US is holding under economic embargo. And you attack the DPRK and call them aggressors because they have nuclear missiles. A while back, when John Bolton was still in power, he said the US was looking at pursuing the Libya model with North Korea. Do you know what the Libya model is? In Libya, the US said Muammar Gaddafi had to give up his nuclear program and stop proliferating nuclear weapons. Gaddafi did, and the US promptly invaded his country and brought Libya from the country with the highest standard of living of any nation in Africa down to a country that's impoverished, destabilized, and has an open-air slave market. The DPRK knows that this is their future if they give up their nuclear weapons program. The US will intervene, do everything they can to overthrow them, and turn the DPRK into a neo-colony. And this isn't some hidden Tankie secret. John Bolton was saying this in the open to the media, saying we are going to follow the Libya model. The DPRK would have to be absolutely insane to give up their nuclear program when the US is openly saying they want to follow the same model as Libya, a country who has been overthrown and destabilized. And no, Vaush, I'm not saying things are as simple as the US is exclusively responsible for the DPRK's political structure. What I'm saying is that you can't ignore the history of the DPRK and the fact that they fought a war of independence against brutal Japanese colonizers who had long extracted resources using borderline slave labor, and immediately after gaining their independence had to fight a war against the United States, which killed 15 to 20% of their population and didn't leave a single building over 2 stories tall left standing. And if you ignore this historical context, and if you don't give this historical context to your audience, you are misleading them and you are bringing out major parts of the story that lead into the development and the creation of the DPRK's political structure.
They're not as smart as you, Vaush. And some people are saying it's bad that you dabbed on the millions of Koreans who died. You know, they're like, how can you sit
Wait, so this isn't even a response to the video. This is just like angry Tankie sounds?
behind your computer and make hundreds of dollars calling yourself a socialist and then dab on the murder of millions of socialists?
I don't care about this civility politics bullshit from genocide deniers. I'm sorry, I don't care. If you're the person who I was debating literally jokes about genocide, and they did so in that conversation. It's just memes, lol. I don't care. I cry harder.
So you dabbed on the millions of victims of imperialist aggression because the person you were in conversation with was making jokes about genocide? I mean, that's a weird justification there. It kind of seems like you're doing the exact same thing as them, mocking the victims. And I'm not civility policing you. What I'm saying is very specific, and I think you missed the point. What I'm saying is that you are using your giant platform to promote chauvinistic and imperialistic attitudes that the State Department has tried to instill in our public for a long time. And you, as a socialist with a large platform living within the heart of the empire, should give the full context and the history about socialist experiments overseas. That's called proletarian internationalism, which is something that we've been lacking a lot of lately.
By the country that you're sitting in. You know, but those people are just...
Also, I make thousands dabbing on tankies, not hundreds. I make hundreds of thousands.
Bragging about making hundreds of thousands of dollars dabbing on the victims of a war perpetrated by our country. You know, it's weird that people in the DPRK don't like us. They must all just be crazy tankies.
Tankies who worship Kim Jong-un. They're not as smart as you, Vaush.
True.
Socialism.
Okay, wait. That wasn't even like a criticism, really. That was just being mad.
I mean, that was a snarky TikTok, but I didn't just make it because I was mad. I was criticizing you for using your giant platform to promote imperialistic and chauvinistic narratives towards a country that the US has been trying to destroy for 70 plus years under the excuse of, oh, I'm not a crazy tankie. Like I said, I'm not saying you have to support them outright. I'm not saying you can't critique them. I'm just saying as a Marxist, you need to put first their right to national sovereignty and their right to economic well-being. Both things which the US has tried to destroy for years and years now. It seems to me like you fit everything into this binary of tankies and non-tankies. Tankies are crazy and irrational, whereas non-tankies are rational, and we hate all the countries who the U.S. is trying to overthrow. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying when you're talking about these countries who the U.S. has been launching regime change efforts and economic warfare against for years, you should give the full context of their struggle, and you should give the full history of their struggle, and you should have support for that country's proletariat. And if you're going to critique them living within the heart of the empire, understand that you do live within the heart of the empire, and there are massive propaganda campaigns being led against these countries. So it's our job as socialists, with sort of a platform here, to tell the truth about these countries and speak out against imperialist aggression, even if you have critiques of the DPRK's government. That's what being a tankie is. I don't know, crazy. And Vaush goes on to talk about how he doesn't have a problem with YouTubers making a lot of money, and I criticized him for how much money he was making, of course, which again wasn't my point. I'm saying that people call you a Western chauvinist, Vaush, and it clearly makes you very angry because you live in the richest country in the world who, since World War II at least, and even before that, have extracted resources from the global south and many, many other countries, with the DPRK being one of the countries who's fought back against that. So for you to sit in the United States comfortably making a lot of money while criticizing and calling this country that the U.S. has tried to destroy and has held in poverty using military force, a horrible authoritarian dictatorship, you're missing a lot of the historical context and you're misleading your audience about the history of this country's struggle. Your audience, who also mostly lives in the United States, who, like I said, have been trying to overthrow this country for years. So I'm going to leave a little link tree in the description to this where you can find more sources on the DPRK, independent sources outside of the U.S. Western media hegemony, and that'll teach you more about them. And if I could recommend anyone, it would be Loyal Citizens of Pyonyang. It's a great movie that'll explain kind of how the U.S. propagates these narratives about North Korea that they're just this completely insane authoritarian country with no reason for being the way that they are. So check that out. Let me know what you think of it. And thanks for responding to me, Vaush. I gained a lot of followers from this, so I appreciate you. I hope you learned something from this video. If you have a disagreement, please bring this video up on your stream and promote it again. I love that. Okay, bye.